importance of wills and estates in Islam. So briefly, before I hand over to Muhammad, hadith that I would like to narrate from Abdullah bin Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, where Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam has said, it is not permissible for any Muslim who has something to will to stay for 2 nights without having his last will and testament written and kept ready with him. I mean, this hadith is sufficient to emphasize the importance of wills. And I hand over to Muhammad, our guest tonight, who's from Tazkiyah. Briefly will introduce himself and tell us what they doing with regards to wills and services they can render to the community, inshallah. Muhammad, over to you.
Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum to everyone, and I do apologize for my lateness. I'm having one of those technical difficulty days where technology seems to fail me. Nonetheless, what I do is I manage the Sharia department at Capital Legacy, known as Tazkiyah. So that's the brand that we deal with. What we do at Tazkiyah is we enable people amongst the Muslim community to manage their wills and to actually have a proper estate plan. So when they pass away, there's no difficulties and issues that they may face and the family may face in the long term, and as well as in winding up of the estate. A lot of us know as Samir mentioned, that the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ is quite sufficient for us to understand the type and the importance of what it is when we're doing wills. A lot of the misconception that we find is that people limit it to wills, and they limit everything to only having a will done. And while this is completely true, there's a much broader aspect that we in the Muslim community need to deal with, even for the fact that we are actually living in a non-Muslim country. What I'm going to do is go through a presentation for you, just to let you understand the kind of situation that we have, this kind of situation that what we would do in terms of estate planning and how we would look at it as a whole, within a holistic view. So here we're looking at the importance of Sharia estate planning and wills itself. We know from the Quranic ayat in Surah Nisa, the depiction and how estates are split. So this is one such ayat that we would look at. And these ayahs go on for a few more lines where Allah depicts and says exactly what needs to be done within the Sharia and how an estate needs to be split. When we don't have a will, and I'm not going to go into those actual details because everybody's situation does somewhat differ. So I'm not going to go into that specifically, but I will show you all a kind of general overview when I'm towards the end of this presentation of what actually goes on in terms of the actual distribution. For what I would like to focus on is something like reasons for having a will and actual estate planning side in itself. We do know that because a will and the distribution of the estate is mentioned in Quran in such detail, that the distribution when you pass away is actually a fard. Now, within the South African context, some people and lots of ulama say that it's wajib to have a will, whereas in other situations it may be sunnah. So if you're living in a country which is Muslim, it may not be as important to have a will. If you have, just a few assets and it's going to go out to your family according to Quranic distribution, simply because being a Muslim means your estate will be distributed according to the Quranic inscription. Whereas in South Africa, we don't have that. If you were to pass away, your assets would go interstate succession, meaning that the master of the High Court would actually determine who must get what from your estate and at what value. This is something that we'd like to stay away from, simply because, like I said, it's a fard for your estate to be distributed in a specific manner. So the first thing for having a will, and one of the most important reasons, is that you have actual control over the asset distribution. How this plays out is when you sign up a Sharia will, it basically states that it will go according to Sharia. When you pass away, we go into one of the ulama bodies. So if you're Sunni, for instance, or if you're Shafi, or if you're Hanafi, we go to one of the Sunni ulama bodies. If you're Hanafi, we go to one of the Hanafi ulama body. So, for instance, South Africa, you have the Sunni Ulama Judicial Council. We'll go to them for the Shafi madhab, and for the Hanafi madhab, we'll go to Jamiat Ulama South Africa. They basically give us their distribution. Now, while distribution in its main, for the most part, is very much the same, simply because if you were to pass away and you have parents, you have a spouse, you have kids, the distribution won't change at all. There are other places where that may change. For instance, if there's a wasiya attached to it, or if you don't have any male heirs or ascendants or descendants, and you have someone that's going to inherit brothers, sisters, maybe cousins, uncles, and so on, then this madhab come into play. So other than that, there's no distribution differences, or madhab differences rather. In terms of your reasons for will, again, your guardianship of minors. A lot of people think that to have a will is only to stipulate who is going to take and how my assets are distributed. What people don't realize, and for me, one of the most important facets of a will is if you have a minor child, or if you have a child that is disabled or in some way can't take care of themselves, then who takes care of that child? And this is one of the most important areas of having a will. So what we would do here is we would stipulate on our wills who's going to be the guardians. We allow you and your spouse to decide on it. It doesn't have to always be the same, but we prefer that it will be the same. So we'd ask you that question and give you time to decide on it as well. So we would have that stipulated in the will as well. By having the means of a will, and especially having a Sharia will, often we find that the family disputes are minimalized. So we don't have as many issues because for the most part, a lot of the Muslims actually do accept that this is the Sharia, this is what we're going to go with. Another thing with not just having a will, but rather with estate planning in general, is the tax efficiency that we can then allot to that family or to that individual. What people don't realize is that winding up of an estate is actually a costly affair. And by having estate planning in its totality, we can then ensure that your family doesn't actually lose assets when you pass away. So again, going back to the thing about estate planning, protection of assets, and coming up with having a guardian, having trustees for your children. So minor kids in South Africa, it should be stipulated that it will be in a children's trust, and assets will move into a children's trust, so it's protected up until they reach age of majority, meaning 18 and above. When they do that, we then can ensure that the assets that you hold and that you've left for your family are actually kept in check. Whereas if you were to leave it to, let's say, the master, and there's no one that he feels that is actually someone that he can deal with, or rather that they want to move the assets into the government guardian fund, all assets are sold, cash is put in there, and your children basically get 100,000 rand per year. So that's something that you don't want must happen. So we're going to, again, look at protection of assets in a total view. Consequences of not having a will, like we mentioned, inheritance. So where you could have had a Sharia will and done your obligation towards Allah and the Prophet ﷺ, that is forfeited by the Master of the High Court by doing whatever he wishes. The marriage, if you have a surviving partner, you can then protect your partner by having proper estate planning in place so that the person can actually manage, especially when you have much older people in the marriage where you don't want them to lose their assets. And unfortunately, in our community now, it's becoming more and more common where children are pushing their parents, the one parent, the surviving parent, to actually sell the assets so that they can take their money out of it. It's something that's happening and something that we need to manage as well. In terms of children not having a will, like I mentioned, that it will go to the government guardian fund, and we want to ensure that we stay far away from that. We don't want your assets to go to the government guardian fund. It kind of stops some of the feuds that you may have. Also, by having a will and proper estate planning, it means that there's not much discussions after the death of the person of what actually needs to take place. So a person can actually manage their situation in a much easier way, and we as a company or whoever is dealing with your estate can actually manage it in a much quicker manner. Guardianship for children, like I said, is one of the most important aspects, both having a guardian for your kids and then also having a trust. So you have two types of trusts when it comes to testamentary trusts, meaning after your death. You have one for children, specifically for minors, which has a vesting age. So you can say that your 5-year-old child will have power to act on the assets and have power of ownership of the assets at age 22, or 18 being minimum, but let's say 22. Or the other one is that you have a lifelong trust where your child will be managed, where the trust will manage your child's assets and will give them on a month-to-month basis a certain amount of money. This is usually for children who can't take care of themselves. So if there's any difficulties that they have, or if there's kids or family members, either too old or also kids or family members who are, have some sort of addiction where you know that they could lose all the assets, and actually leaving them with the power of the assets is detrimental to them. So these are the type of things that we can do by actually having estate planning done properly. Just to go through something quickly, and I think it's very important for people to understand this. Tax and fees when a person passes away. So lots of people don't realize. A lot of my clients would say that we have a will. Why is it going to take us? Why is it still going to cost us money? Why do we need to actually wind up? It doesn't this just mean that everything goes over to the next person? That's completely incorrect. You have executive fees, which is up to 3.5% plus VAT. So a lawyer can charge you anything up to 3.5% plus VAT. So that's the maximum value. So give you an idea, on a R1 million estate, that will be 40,000 Rand. If you add the VAT value to it, it's just over 40,000 Rand. Conveyancing, value of property on your name. If you have a property that's in your name specifically, or if it's in a company name or it's in a trust name, that's separate from you. But if it's in your specific name, then what would happen is that we'd have to convey that property. There's no transfer duties when you pass away, but there is conveyancing. And so we have to convey that property and put that property from your name into your dependents' names or inheritors' names, and that's going to cost money. So on a R1 million property, you're looking at least 22,000 Rand. So already the estate starts off with a 60,000 Rand value. Then if there's any minors or people with special needs, then that's going to be a trust that needs to be placed as well. The setup of the trust, the running of the trust, the adding of the assets into the trust, and then the year-to-year audits and accounting fees that need to be taken care of as well needs to be paid. So when a person passes away, it's actually quite expensive to wind up the estate. And obviously, these are just percentages. So if you have to escalate that to your own personal estate, you can see what values are potentially going to be paid out. Then you have the other area, which is taxation. So this is the fees that's charged. So these are legal fees that's charged. Then you have taxation. Tax on the tax side, you have a 3.5 million Rand abatement, meaning any estate over 3.5 million Rand will be taxed. So only the portion over the 3.5 million, up to 3.5 million, there's an abatement. There's a 4Q or section 4Q abatement as well, meaning everything that goes to your spouse is not taxed. However, when that asset is now, when your spouse passes away and the asset is now transferred over to the children, there's now taxation that's going to be placed on it. We then look at the 4Q abatement or the 3.5 million abatement from the mother and the father, and that's 3.5. So you have a 7 million abatement that goes down to the kids. So if there's anything on top of that 7 million Rand, they will pay 20%. However, there is a 20% on up to 30 million Rand worth of assets, and anything on top of the 30 million Rand will be 25%, right? So that's the taxation side of it. So like I said at the beginning, it's nice to say that we have a Sharia will, but did you do your estate plan, which is very important as well. In terms of the Sharia, if there's any questions and things, you're welcome to jump in and ask it, right? If you'll need to. In terms of the Sharia, there's also primary inheritors. So if we look at it, parents, spouse, kids, all blood relatives, secondary heirs, paternal grandsons, granddaughters, brothers, sisters, and so on. So you can see the list. This is who's going to inherit from you depending on your specific situation. So just to look at a quick case study of how an estate will be split. So a man passes away, he leaves behind a mother, father, wife, daughter, son. So this would be the situation. Each of the percentages, as you see, the share. So all of our assets and all our estates and distributions are done in the share percentage, or rather the shares, the fraction of it, as that is depicted in Quran, and then we utilize a percentage based on that. So what you have here is a mother 16, or mother and father 16.6% each, wife 12.5%, simply because there's a son and a daughter. The daughter gets half share of the son, so whatever is remaining, 30% goes to the 36% to the son and 18% to the daughter. So this is a typical scenario that we would come across in terms of a distribution. What would happen here often is that if we have to take that 1 million Rand asset that I mentioned earlier, you would see that the parents would get up to 330,000 rand. So they're getting their 1/3 of the estate. When we do estate planning, we kind of utilize different means of explaining this to you. And when there's life covers and things involved, we explain how those things can be utilized to ensure that the wife, in this case, is able to keep possession of the house so that the parents can still get their Sharia share, but the wife can still keep the possession of the house. If we have to go one step further from here, a mother and a father doesn't mind that the wife and the grandchildren live in this house. However, one of those people pass away or both of those parents pass away. Usually the brothers and sisters of the deceased, in this case here, would come and say that they have now a claim on that property, on that asset, on that business. And so this is where a lot of problems come in at a later stage. So what we want to do is ensure that when we're doing an estate plan, first, you are notified about all of these potentials and what could happen. And secondly, give you the solutions to it. So that's what we would do in terms of our total estate planning with your family. Now, this is just one scenario. There's many others that go through where there's difference in the situations. Sometimes there's kids from other marriages that's in it and how those things can affect the estate plan exactly. It's not always that they're going to inherit from it, but if there's a community of property marriage or something like that, how then things are then affected in that way. Or if two people pass away, so your parents, both mother and father pass away at the same time, what happens with the estate in that case? So these are all the things that we would look at when we're dealing with an estate. One of the most important aspects of, and what I've encountered a lot, is people usually try to have this thing that states there's, once we pass away, it's all in Allah's hands. We don't have any responsibility on what happens. The truth is you do have responsibility, and the responsibility is to take care of your children. It's to take care of your wife or your husband, to take care of your parents. That's why the will is split in a certain way. We know from risk management that there are hadiths that show us that there is such a thing in the deen. And one such hadith is tie your camel, where the Badu was there and he left his camel and the Prophet ﷺ told him to tie it. We know those type of scenarios took place. And these are things that tell us, well, utilize what we can to actually manage your situation. And this is not only in risk management for your estates, but this is in everyday life. If there's crime in your area, you have to put an alarm, you have to put a gate. It's the same kind of scenario. Islam has always promoted assisting each other in terms of loss. And we know from a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ relating to mutual assistance, the Ashari tribe came to the Prophet ﷺ and said, we have this type of scenario when during the holy battles or when there's food that ran short in Medina, or when there was droughts and famine and things like this, what we would do is we would come together as a group of people. We would put all our wheat, let's say, in one piece of cloth, and then whatever we brought in, we would put together and accumulate it, and then we would share it equally amongst each other so that during that period, we would actually be taken care of. And the Prophet ﷺ accepted this practice. So it is a practice that we kind of utilize today in Takaful and in other things, but just to show you that there is such a thing as coming together, mutual assistance, and how we can actually benefit each other by understanding the scenarios that we're in. And one of the most important things from my side is not to promote anything, but rather to say that when you're doing your estate planning, firstly, it's imperative to have a Muslim with you that does it. And the reason is that if you go to a non-Muslim, often when I go to clients and they speak to me about it, they would tell me, oh, but my broker said that this is how the estate will be split. And you're like, well, who's your broker? And they'll tell you John so-and-so. Whereas you're like, well, that's not how the Sharia works. And never take your deen from a non-Muslim. So again, we have to understand that part of it. Go to a Muslim, have someone that understands the totality of risk management or the totality of estate planning before you actually do something and tie something down. So have total understanding from fees to costs to your taxation and what are the different rules of taxation, how to utilize those rules of taxation and legally so that you don't have to actually pay much in terms of the law. All of those things are very important. So for me, it's absolutely imperative that you look at it. We are coming to World's Month, so there's going to be a big drive in the country for Worlds. But I think for as Muslims, we understand from the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ and from the fact that there's Quranic ayah that's so specific on your Worlds to actually have this taken out. So in that case, I'd like to finish off there. If there's any questions, please, you're welcome to ask it.
like Mohammed said, the floor is open to all the participants. Please feel free to ask. Um, if you also want to email or WhatsApp the messages, Mohammed will obviously forward the context of himself and his team to us so we can ask necessary questions. But I think when it comes to Islamic worlds and this type of information, it's obviously preferable to have a one-on-one session, if I'm correct, Mohammed. Because it's too
Yes,
difficult to have a
definitely.
generic question, a generic answer, but maybe somebody could have it. And I think just from our side, the most important reason that we're having a session like this with Mohammed and team, I've been privy to be exposed to Tazkiyah myself. I've done already a Sharia world with the team. But the importance is to bring it out to the public to say that, like you said, Mohammed, we have a responsibility from an Islamic point of view. It's first that we make sure that the world is done. A lot of our people just tend to relax and say, like what you said, even in between your presentation, we leave it in Allah's hands. There's no such a thing. Allah has given us the akal, Allah has given us the brain, the capacity, and now we are fortunate with companies like yourselves, where we have Islamic advisors, from Sharia boards that are helping us, and there's a lot of services that we can get from Tazkiyah. And I think maybe if there's any questions while we're waiting for that, I just want to ask Mohammed, how does the services work from you guys' side? I don't want to say that because it's not for me or you to say we actually are out to advertise for businesses. Our main aim at this point in time is to obviously discuss the importance of Sharia worlds. And there's a lot of other business benefits in the background, yes, which Mohammed can share that will go and be linked to the Sharia worlds. So, Mohammed, maybe let's just find out first from the guys if there's any questions. Any questions from the participants there? Masood Bhai, I know you're one of our elderly brothers there. You can maybe just help us with a question or two or points that you want us to speak about, please.
No, Assalamu alaikum. I think so. Mohammed has, outlined, the Sharia worlds and estate planning, and quite in quite detail. So I don't think I can add anything, and but it is important, for us to, get Muslims involved in our worlds when we're throwing up our worlds.
Okay, is there anyone else with any questions there? Maf, I just want to see the chat, Mohammed. I think there's possibly a note or something. Okay, I see Dayan is also here on saying that. Okay, just to maybe even introduce Mohammed, there's Dayan, Dayan Khan, who's part of the Capital Legacy team as well. So maybe just to introduce him there, Mohammed, if it's fine with you, that you can just let the people know that he's part of the team and briefly what he's
Yes, of course.
doing.
Yes.
Dan, maybe just switch your camera on briefly and let the community know who you are. Obviously, this is somebody from within our own community, brothers and sisters. A lot of us know that he's our family as well. And alhamdulillah, he's moved into the field of Islamic worlds, etc. here. Dan?
Salam, how's everyone?
Alaikum salam.
Gee, so I work with Tazkiyah, but I work for Dynasty Islamic. So if you guys need any help with drafting your worlds, if you need any Tazkiyah, they also have something called a Sharia live cover. I don't know if Mohammed went through that also, but yeah, they do all of that. So if you guys need any help, you can just message me or Amir Mamo, and we'll get you guys sorted, inshallah.
Okay. So I kept the estate. I kept this here more towards the wills and estate planning. I felt that that's more or less what we needed. But yes, we do offer Sharia life cover. We're the only company in the country that does so. If there is something more specific that you guys would need in terms of that, you're welcome to contact Dayan, and then he can take you through that. I also have my consultant on here, Nadir Fortune. He probably will come with Dayan to see some of your clients. So some of you, he does see some of Dayan's clients. And so you all can have those discussions in greater detail with your specific issues directly with them.
Okay, maybe just one more thing, Mohammed. You mentioned, inshallah, in September, it's, I think it's World's Day itself. Or do you
Yeah.
have the September month where the worlds are being more frequently advertised and shared with the people in the communities? So just to let the brothers know, inshallah, there's a possibility we will plan something with Mohammed and team as well. Like I said, we want to create this awareness, but the awareness is more about fulfilling our Islamic responsibilities and duties, inshallah. But for now, like Mohammed says, maybe we can conclude, I would say, and up to you, like I said, in your team, for contact details, if you'd like to share a little later on, that we can put it onto the WhatsApp groups and the emails that we send out to the participants. They're free to communicate. And then obviously the videos that will be coming out after this, I please urge the brothers and sisters, share it with the families and the communities. Obviously, we do have our groups that we will share it with. But I think the importance is about being about more vocal, to families and friends. A lot of us are sitting there. We talk about the world and we do nothing about it. All we have is a world that is 20 years old and we don't even look at it and edit it. Things have changed, And like I said, from our side, I would like to take the opportunity to say thanks to Mohammed and team, Nadir and Dayan for attending as well and being part of this presentation. I'm sure we will have something again in the future. But from our side, we'd like to say shukran jazilan from the bottom of our hearts. And Allah bless you guys with success and barakah to continue doing this work because it's a work of barakah and work of what Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam has done. So shukran to the participants as well, inshallah. And we'll meet again next week and forward to the recording that will come. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thanks, everyone.
Barakallah khair.